Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. You're watching In Deep on the Delta, and I'm up here in beautiful Northern California with my friend Troy Gray, and we're going to talk about swim baits, paddle tail swim baits, and we're going to really focus in on the 4 to 6 inch swim baits. And I want to just start off by saying that for you guys that are just getting into swim baits, you don't want to start off with the HUD. You don't want to start off with these guys here. It's going to cause you more frustration than you will believe. And most of the guys that I know that start off with these, Troy, they go for weeks, months, even years without catching a fish.
Not even getting bit.
Not even getting bit. It takes a whole different skill set to fish these bigger paddle tail swim baits or hard body swim baits. You don't just graduate from here to here. So what we're going to be doing is talking about fishing the mid-size swim baits, 4 to 6 inch paddle tail swim baits. And I'll tell you, Troy, I mean, we've talked about this for years. These are big enough baits that they're going to catch the big fish, and they're also not too big to where you're going to get a lot of 1 to 3 and 4 pound fish. So this style bait here, 4 to 6 inches, is going to catch every fish in the lake. And what that's going to do, starting off with these guys, graduating from say this size to this size, or if you're in a Keitech, a 5.8 maybe, yep. What that's going to do is it's going to give you the confidence that fish will bite these things, and it's also going to start you on the journey to the skill set that it's going to take to run these big guys. So when you do decide to put down $25 or $30 on a bigger swim bait, you're going to have a background and a skill set that's going to allow you to transition and maybe start catching some fish on these things, and where it's not going to take you 6 months, a year, 2 years before you get bit on that. So that's why we're focusing in on the 4 to 6, maybe 7 inch swim baits. If you learn the basics and learn a few little tricks here and there, and hopefully we'll be able to pass those on. Troy's a master at swim bait fishing up here in the Clearwater lakes that you fish. You fish these things year round, yep. and they're effective year round. They're effective from 2 feet to 40 feet, yep. and there's just a few things that you need to know, so we're going to cover it. So Troy, talk about a couple of your favorite baits, and then we'll get into the rigging.
Sure. Of course, everybody should be familiar with a Keitech, the Fat Impact swing bait. This one's 5.8, pretty common. They also have the Easy Shiner application, which, depending on the depth you're going to fish and how you're going to rig them, both of these are very effective. A couple of different ways to rig, everything from you can see like a jig head application to maybe weedless underbelly type application. So it kind of depends on where you're fishing, what water you're fishing, as to how you're going to approach throwing a swim bait. And
also the underspins too.
Oh yeah.
We don't have one.
Actually, we do have a couple of my favorites. Fairly reasonable is a Berkeley Fusion. My favorite one is a fish head swim bait. A new one that's just came out is a Keitech. I really like this because you can see, or we'll show you closer in a little bit, how big the hook is in this application. They hold on. And one that not too many people throw, but it works great, is a Hog Farmer. So just a couple of different baits that are very effective. And you'll find the one you have the most confidence with.
So Troy, let's talk about how you want to rig these things up and the do's and don'ts of having a good bait and a bait that's not going to produce.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing that you want to be cognizant of is when you're taking your bait, you want to, and if I just take this little Yorkshire head, Megabass head, and I use it, you want to put it on straight. And why that's so important is if I put this off sideways or whatever, it doesn't swim proper. But if they don't swim right and it's a big fish, they got big for a reason, they're smart, they're going to come up and inspect that bait, and if it doesn't look right to them, they probably won't take it. So really important, And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you, I'm going to start out with the nose, and on these particular baits here, these Keitechs, you can see they have a line down the center of them, which helps you line up this bait. This is one way you can guarantee that you're going to get right down the center. I'm going to start out by running this bait down the center, and I'm going to get it just about to the center here where I want it, pull it through, and you can see this has got a little ridge in it. So what I'm very apt to do is I pull it a little bit. So now you can see how that bait is perfectly straight. You can see that there's no bend in it, it lines up. And what I would do after that, after I tie it on, I'm going to put it in the water and I'm going to inspect it to make sure it does swim correctly. Very key in getting more bites with this particular bait.
You're going to tear up a lot of baits out here, and I've got one bait that is pretty tore up. My suggestion is when you catch a few fish and they start pulling down, don't wait till they're totally destroyed, you know, because you put them back on here and then you can see this isn't running right. You got to readjust everything, or you get the hooks fouled up. Pull it off and put these things, you know, in your little pile and repair them. Take them home and repair them before you tear them up totally. And what you can use is this Mend It. You guys all know what Mend It is. Same thing for the worms. What I like to do when I am repairing swim baits is I will take a little, what the heck do they call this?
It's a syringe.
It's a syringe. You can buy these cheap little things at Hobby Lobby or whatever, and it's got the syringe point on it. So I'll fill this up with Mend It, or about halfway full, and then when I am having a problem with these things, when I get home, I can take these, and where the hook comes in here, I could take the syringe point and stick it right in where the hook is, start pushing this out and pull the syringe out, and then just get this in here.
And you want to do the same thing with where the hook protrudes
right
through.
down in here, you can see there's a tear in here, and I could take this syringe and put it right in that tear and get it inside, get the Mend It inside, and these things are almost as good as new.
Honestly, if I'm going to fish a tournament, a lot of times I'll fish a new bait because I'm in a tournament. I don't want to mess around with anything. If I'm out practicing or just having a fun day, I have a stack of used baits that I've repaired, like Steve's talking about. It takes a few minutes at home. I leave them set there, even if I'm going to go out the next day overnight, and I'm going to use those same baits. And instead of spending $10 again, or $9 on a pack of these, I get to reuse them. And so, you know, it helps with cost effectiveness. The type of jig head I like to use, Steve held one up here that has one shank on it. I'm using a jig head that has multiple little rings and shanks. And the reason I'm using that is because I can put a drop of super glue in between those two. And then when I pull it all the way up, it puts a ring of super glue all the way from the head all the way down through here and holds that bait very thoroughly.
The rod that I use, and if you don't have a dedicated swim bait rod, for these 4 to 6 inch paddle tails, I use a Dybins 7'3" medium heavy rod with a Curado 200 reel. And most of the time when Troy and I are fishing, we're doing something a little different. I tend to use, because I'm a Delta guy, I've got 45 to 65 pound braid, and I'll generally put about 15 feet of 12 to 14 pound mono leader on it. I know, Troy, you've got a Dybins Champion.
Yeah, I've got a Dybins Champion, which is the model here is a 794. It's a 1 to 3 power, or I should say ounce swim bait rod that I use specifically for these smaller swim bait applications. When we go to the bigger stuff, which we aren't talking about today, you can move up to a 2 to 6 ounce swim bait rod.
And that's the other reason you start out with these. You don't have to buy a new swim bait rod. You use what you have to throw, maybe a chatterbait or something like that.
Every time you get a bite, inspect the area. Where did I throw it? At what depth did I get bit? The guys who are really good fishermen and repetitively do well, every bite they get, they've paid attention to what the structure was. Is it a deep sloping bank? Is it a sharp point drop off on one side? Does it have stumps around it? What kind of rock structure? Very important. If I'm fishing Northern California lakes, deeper type lakes, I'm going to throw a Flurorocarbon line. What that does is that helps the line will sink, and as that line sinks, it keeps it engaged with the bottom for a longer period of time.
After I rig these, I not only put them on the boat in the water and test them as they're coming through the water to make sure that they are running straight and clean. I also lift them up and make sure that when they're coming up, they're not falling over, and when they're dropping straight. And there's a reason that I do that. I want to make sure as I am fishing throughout my cast, as I cast and this bait is dropping, it's not corkscrewing, they just don't seem to want to hit it. If it's falling in a straight manner and that tail is just working properly, they'll come up and hit it on the fall just like a worm.
Many times.
They'll hit the bait at any time in the retrieve, but when it is raising in elevation or falling, that could be a trigger. So that's the other reason that as I feel that bottom tick and I want to lift the rod up, I may only pull this up 2 or 3 feet and then I'll drop it. But I want that bait not to be going like this. I want it to be swimming up and falling properly. So that's why I don't want it corkscrewing, and that could be a big trigger factor. That fish may follow it for 20 feet. If it stops or if it jumps up here, as soon as that reaches its peak and it starts dropping down, that fish is going to come and grab it.
They do 100% of the time. I will stop my bait before I retrieve it all the way or lift it up. When that fish is following a bait for 15-20 feet, it's inspecting it, and when it thinks it's going to get away, it's going to attack it.
So with that, guys, if you set these baits up 1/4 to 1/2 ounce, whatever it is necessary to get down to the bottom, you have them straight, you have patience, you can fish these things slow enough to keep them on the bottom, you don't mind losing a bait every now and then, you keep these things moving just enough to keep that tail it doesn't have to be vibrating. A lot of people fish these too fast, and you can catch fish doing that. If you want to get the bigger fish, you get these on the bottom real slow enough so that this paddle tail is just kind of working, not vibrating, just working and moving nice and slow. You get bit, you have good contact with the bait, you set hook hard, you keep your rod tip low, you're going to catch a lot of fish on these things. So with that, Troy, thanks for lending some assistance, and you and I know how effective these are, so it's fun to talk about them because we know that if you guys go out and put these to work, you're going to catch a lot of fish. Just give yourself some time and somehow keep telling yourself as you're reeling these things in as slow as possible, I'm going to get bit, I'm going to get bit, I'm going to get bit. It may take throwing these things and throwing them, but man, the first time you get bit on this thing,
it's addictive.
Yeah, once you start feeling the bite of a swim bait, you're going to be throwing these things a lot.
It's very addictive, and as your confidence builds, you will get more and more and more bites. Fishing is confidence.
Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you guys on the water.